Have you ever wondered about working as a cannabis pharmacist? Well, now with it being legal in a lot of states, if not the majority, many pharmacists are getting into the action. But still, we're seeing hesitancy around, do you want to get into something that has been viewed for so long like it's wrong to do? Well, stick around as we dive into this career and explore the culture of cannabis and figure out if this is a career path that you want to consider. Hi, I'm Alex. I'm the founder of the Happy PharmD, where we coach and educate pharmacists on how to get jobs in less than 6 months. And in this video, we'll be breaking down cannabis pharmacy. We'll be talking about the salary to expect, the job market demand, the satisfaction, and the flexibility of getting into this career path. So what does a cannabis pharmacist career look like? Well, you'll be dealing with cannabis, medical marijuana. It's wild to think about that this is a career because even as I was graduating, it was illegal in almost every state, and everyone was talking about how this has some benefit for glaucoma, when in actuality, I think most people want to use it for other reasons. Cannabis has been used medicinally for over 3,000 years, but due to some cultural setbacks, we decided to make it illegal to use, even though practically a huge portion of the population was using it for many, many decades. But now pharmacists can use it to pick certain drugs. They can use it to dose it. They can even assemble it, appropriately dose it, and all of that. Due to federal regulations, some dispensaries are required to have a pharmacist on staff in order to dispense this, since it is considered a medicine. According to some Pew research, we know that there are approximately 15,000 cannabis dispensaries, but we also know that state-to-state laws change and not every dispensary has a pharmacist on staff. A pharmacist on their day-to-day is going to do things like educate patients, check things like pharmacokinetics of certain formulations for patients, depending on disease states that they have. They're going to look up drug-drug interactions, look up patient safety, and monitor for things, and basically, be a pharmacist that specializes in one medicine that does attract a different clientele than the typical community pharmacy setting. Not trying to draw stereotypes here. Just know what you're walking into. You're going to be selling marijuana. Typical job titles for this role would be cannabis pharmacist. Sometimes you can find some under cannabis dispensary pharmacist. Sometimes these roles are within giant dispensaries where you may not even be dealing with the public, and others are smaller facilities where, yes, you'd be handling patient interactions. Let's talk about salary. What should you expect to make as a cannabis pharmacist? Well, according to our research on Glassdoor, we found that the range is from $121 to $177. I think that this is really high. I have not heard many pharmacists in this industry report getting that high. I feel like that's maybe some managers that put in that salary data at the higher points. Typically, the selling point is that these are less stressful work environments, but there's definitely others that would take the cake on that one. On ZipRecruiter, we found that the average was at 126, which again, I'm feeling like this is much higher than what's being reported. So we looked at a few jobs and we found one job that was what I expected. Pharmacist at Cannabis team was at $100,000. So remember, if you're getting into this field, you need to negotiate for your salary. $100,000 is very low for a pharmacist's wage. On Indeed, we found one job that was at $110 to $120. And then we found another job that was quite high in Connecticut at $135. So the salary score is probably going to be lower than most other professions. It's nice that you don't have to have a certificate to get into this typically. So I'm gonna give this score a pretty mediocre, just 5 out of 10, just because it's lower than other jobs. But still, at the end of the day, it's likely going to be above 6 figures, which is nice, but in my opinion, it'd be great if it would be higher. Let's talk satisfaction as a cannabis pharmacist. So unfortunately, we weren't able to find any information in the literature about satisfaction in this field. And honestly, that's not surprising. There's not a lot of us in this field, and not many people are trying to study whether or not these pharmacists are happy. We did find a few comments on Reddit of pharmacists who were claiming to be cannabis pharmacists, and I thought what they had to say was interesting. One said, quote, "It's a weird job. Cannabis is sort of an intersection between medicine and culture." Another one said, "Minimal complaints, which are nothing compared to retail. It's amazing. There is minimal, if any, stress, and the pay is good." And another one ecstatically said, "I love my job. Never stay late, go in early. The work-life balance is fantastic." There's not too many Glassdoor reviews of companies in this space, but we did find a few. One of them was the Organic Pharmacy. All right. And they had it at 3.4, the lowest score being senior management, which is normal trend. Usually people are the least happy with management. The other one we found was the Apothecarium, which is fun to say. And that was pretty low at 2.7. I like to think that a great company has a 3.5 or higher. The higher the better. Given the lack of data, given the fact that satisfaction for pharmacists is often based upon relationships and soft skills, and this has the potential to be really good, but also knowing the clientele, I think that there is good potential that in the states that require pharmacists to be there, that this has, it can be a fulfilling job. The detractors in that space are definitely probably going to be the workplace culture of that, whatever that institute is, right? And it will be different for every dispensary. So there's potential here. I'm gonna give it a trepid 6 out of 10, okay? There's a higher likelihood that you'll be more fulfilled here than say within a very busy hospital or community setting. But there's not a lot of data to support that. A lot of it is anecdotal. So, take it with a grain of salt. Now let's look into the job market demand. And sadly, you're not going to find a whole lot of jobs. When we looked on Indeed.com, we found 25 jobs available. Luckily, 92% of those were entry-level positions, which means it's really easy to get into. When we looked on ZipRecruiter, we only found 23 jobs. If you looked at just community pharmacist positions, you will likely find well over 10,000 jobs available on these websites. If you look at hospital, you'll find a few thousand jobs in the United States. And in clinicals, you'll find it in the hundreds. This is a niche within a niche within a niche. They say riches are in the niches, but as we've already established with salary, that's not so much the case. There will likely be more jobs coming as more states will be legalizing this drug. They will require federal regulations to manage these medicines and thus require, and not all, but in most states, to have a pharmacist being managing the facility and the dispensing of drugs. States like Pennsylvania require a pharmacist to be there, while states like Colorado and California do not. I wouldn't be surprised if some point in the future there will be some major catastrophe or some major error that happens in these facilities that don't have pharmacists. But until then, you're probably not going to be seeing a sweeping change in policy until, unfortunately, something bad happens, which isn't a comment on our political system. It's just, come on, that's the way the world works, unfortunately. We did not find any sign-on bonuses. And the reason for that, I think, is because these places tend to be lower stress than in other facilities, other hospitals or community settings. And so they know that, and they're not looking for the top performing pharmacists to be within these facilities. They're not looking to expand their pharmacy services. It's really just about following federal regulations in many of these dispensaries. When we looked on Indeed for jobs, we found 8 of them, most of them at this one company called Jushi, and they had no applicants. So low competition here. And I don't know if that's a reflection of the company or just that there's not a whole lot of interest from pharmacists to get into this niche. So I think that there is a small but growing demand in this space. There are not a ton of jobs available, and those that get into it typically tend to stay in it. So I'm going to give the job demand score a 4 out of 10. Now let's talk the magic factor, flexibility. How easy is it to get into this? Is it a good work-life balance? Can you be fulfilled by it? Can it go remote? Well, for working hours, we found that most of these jobs is typical Monday through Friday. Sometimes, yeah, on Saturday, on Sunday in larger locations. But typically, like, it's a nice schedule. We did find a few jobs that required 10 and 12-hour shifts, which may be good for you, maybe not. I know that when I was doing 410s, I loved it. Having a 3-day weekend is one of the best things ever. We found a couple of jobs that showed that there was a flexible schedule. One saying like, hey, you only got to work 3 to 5 days a week. I like that. That's a nice commitment. We found very few jobs that required being on call. Some did ask to be flexible, whatever that means. We didn't find a single job that would be remote. It doesn't mean that they couldn't exist. Probably not exactly being a like cannabis pharmacist. There's potential for like telehealth at maybe a few startups, but the vast majority of them are not going to supply that. And how easy is it to get started? Super easy, okay? In those 8 jobs that I showed you on LinkedIn, I looked into each of them and they only require that you have a pharmacy license, no experience. So like, that's nice. Like all you would really need to do is just study up cannabis and like learn a lot about it, watch a few CEs and like go have an interview. Have a good time. So I think some of the perks of this job is that it sounds like it has a great work-life balance. It sounds like a normal Monday through Friday gig, 9 to 5, come home early if you've got a good boss. And I don't think there's a whole lot of like growth opportunities. Like maybe you could go into management or do other things to help out the business, whether it's marketing the pharmacy or other things like that. However, getting into this field, I don't think it brands you as a certain kind of pharmacist. Like, I don't think you're going to be forever in cannabis. I don't think it's impossible for you to leave it to get back into community or hospital, but it's unlikely that this would help you in a transition, say, into pharma or academia or research. Not to say that that's not like impossible, it's just not beneficial. It's benign. So for these reasons, I'm gonna give the flexibility factor a healthy 6 out of 10. Let's give cannabis pharmacy a final score. For salary, I gave it a 5 out of 10 because it's gonna be lower than your hospital or community jobs, probably. For satisfaction, I gave it a 6 out of 10 because there's very little reports, but the pharmacists who are in it anecdotally say it's great. It is going to be highly dependent on who your boss is and the people you work with, but it has the potential to be good. For job market demand, I gave it a 4 out of 10 because there's barely any jobs in this space. It likely isn't going to grow a ton over the next couple of years, but it could. And for flexibility, I gave it a 6 out of 10 because you're going to be probably working Monday through Friday, maybe an occasional weekend. You're probably not going to be able to go remote, but it's not going to probably be as stressful as other jobs. That adds up to a final score of 5 out of 10. It's middle of the road. You know, this is a decent job to consider. It's niche. It's not something that means that you couldn't go do something else. You know, honestly, I've seen people take the cannabis career path and it's almost more like a stepping stone. Like it's a job that leads them into something else. And I know one pharmacist that got into it out of retail, went to go be in cannabis. And I remember that after that, she was like, you know what, I really want to get into advocacy because she saw how patients were struggling and they were using cannabis, you know, to assuage other problems. And it made her want to fight for those people. So she got into advocacy, which led to a nonprofit, which led to getting into the association. So like there's potential to get into other things and it's not impossible. If you're in cannabis pharmacy, I'd love to hear your opinion about the career path and if maybe I've missed something that I should have talked about. Hey, did you like this video? If you did, hit the like button if you'd be so kind. If you didn't, hit the dislike and let us know what we could do differently in future career videos. Thank you for watching this. I hope you're having a great day. And until I see you in the next one, stay curious and take care.